đang mây mưa với vợ mà chồng đã xỉu ra thì còn nói chuyện gì nữa. Vợ sẽ rất là bực mình, ảnh hưởng rất lớn đến hạnh phúc gia đình. Nam giới rồi ai cũng bị yếu cái khoản đó rồi. Càng có tuổi thì càng sức khỏe giảm sút, đặc biệt là vấn đề sinh lý. Một người thầy thuốc cho nên cái tâm sinh lý tôi hiểu chứ. Bởi vì cái tình dục ấy nó là vấn đề cực kỳ quan trọng trong một cái cuộc sống của vợ chồng. Tôi nói thật, anh nào mà yếu về sinh lý ấy thì đã mất nửa đời người khoái cảm rồi. Mà như thế thì còn gì nữa, một đời người sống được bao nhiêu năm lắm mà yếu. Bởi vậy cho nên anh nào mà yếu về sinh lý thì hãy đến với tôi và hãy dùng sản phẩm chính của tôi. Chính tôi dùng thường xuyên, thì dại gì tôi không dùng. Bởi vì tôi nghiên cứu, tôi biết tác dụng của nó. Nhất là tôi lại là một bác sĩ, thì dại gì tôi không dùng. Chính tôi dùng cái đó thì mới đáp ứng được cái nhu cầu của vợ tôi, và ngược lại thì tôi mới khỏe được như thế này. Cái Trường Xuân Vương này là anh càng uống nó càng đầm và sức khỏe chung nó đi lên. Vì nó có tác dụng là tâm, can, tỳ, phế, thận, thì nó tăng cường được cái sức khỏe chung. Tôi nói thật, tôi năm nay có tuổi đấy. Thế nhưng mà đáng như cái tuổi của tôi ấy là không đẻ được đâu. Nhưng tôi uống cái này, thành ra tôi lúc nào cũng là 35 tuổi.
Vâng.
Đấy, thành ra là tôi vẫn đẻ bình thường. Đấy, anh Đoàn biết, tôi hơn 80 tuổi lấy vợ đẻ ngay con gái. Mấy cậu nó bảo nó cái mã của ông đẻ sao được con gái, đẻ luôn phát con gái nữa.
Chứng minh luôn đúng không?
Chứng minh luôn, đây là Trường Xuân Vương.
Cái sản phẩm Trường Xuân Vương này từ khi tôi sử dụng thì tôi thấy sức khỏe rất tốt, chung là ngủ tốt, mà về bên đây sinh lý cũng rất tốt. Nói chung là vẫn cứ tất cả là tôi vẫn cứ chiều được các bà vợ.
Thế từ trước ông chưa uống cái thuốc này thì một đêm là ông phải đi tiểu tiện hơi nhiều lần. Nhưng từ ngày ông uống cái thuốc này để là cái độ đi tiểu tiện nó ít đi và cái ngủ thì nó cũng không có đau lưng, không phải vặn vẹo gì người ngậm, không phải bẻ cổ chân cổ tay gì. Thế thỉnh thoảng có gặp bà tí là vui vẻ, cái là ngủ là một mạch cho đến sáng luôn. Thế trong cái thuốc này nó có cái hay thế.
Tôi trước cảm thấy nó đau hết cái người, đau lưng. Nhưng sau khi được giới thiệu, mà ông Trọng giới thiệu nói về cái sản phẩm Trường Xuân Vương này rất là tốt, thì tôi dùng khoảng được 2 tuần. Tôi thấy cảm thấy người nó khỏe khoắn ra. Mà bởi khi tôi dùng được của thuốc này là nó khỏi, nó đỡ ra, mà coi như cảm thấy đi lại với vợ nó khoan khoái hơn.
Sau khi sử dụng sản phẩm Trường Xuân Vương, giờ tinh thần của mình nó phấn chấn hơn này, công việc được tốt hơn này, các mối quan hệ với bạn bè này, đồng nghiệp này được cải thiện hơn, thân thiện hơn, vui hơn, và đặc biệt nữa là vợ mình vui hơn thì gia đình trong nhà lúc nào cũng có tiếng cười vui vẻ. Và vì nói đúng câu là bây giờ mình cảm giác mình được lên chức, trên bảo dưới nó nghe nên là mình rất là an tâm và sử dụng sản phẩm Trường Xuân Vương này.
Mình có biểu hiện của chứng rối loạn cương dương. Đây là một vấn đề rất là nhạy cảm. Tôi cũng khó có thể tâm sự được cùng với ai, nhưng cũng rất là may trong một lần nhậu cùng ông bạn đã giới thiệu cho tôi đến cái sản phẩm Trường Xuân Vương này. Sau khi sử dụng thử một liệu trình, tôi thấy sức khỏe cũng như những triệu chứng của tôi giảm rõ rệt.
Mình bắt đầu bị giảm sinh lý nam. Qua cái thời gian sử dụng Trường Xuân Vương ấy, thì mình thấy là cơ thể mình khỏe lên rất là nhiều, và mình thấy sinh lực của mình nó dồi dào hơn là rất là nhiều.
Thế thì sau khi sử dụng sản phẩm được hơn 1 tháng thì tôi thấy là đặc biệt là cái tình trạng yếu sinh lý của tôi đã được cải thiện rõ rệt. Thế trước kia thì hai vợ chồng quan hệ là chỉ được 4 đến 5 phút. Nhưng bây giờ là đã quan hệ khoảng độ 15 đến 20 phút. Tình trạng yếu sinh lý bây giờ là đã được cải thiện khoảng 70-80% rồi. Ngoài ra các cái triệu chứng ví dụ như là tiểu đêm, tiểu dắt và đau mỏi cơ thể là hoàn toàn biến mất. Để cảm thấy là rất là phấn khởi. Thế thì bây giờ là vợ chồng tôi là ngày nào cũng thể dục thể thao mà cảm thấy cuộc sống là viên mãn, hạnh phúc lắm.
Tôi uống 3 ngày thì là tôi thấy là người khoan khoái, mà cảm thấy là muốn gần bà xã. Đó, đấy nói thật là như thế. Thế thì thực ra mà nói tôi đã dùng cái này được 1 tháng rồi. Hiện nay chứng rối loạn cương dương, xuất tinh sớm của tôi là hết sạch. Và lúc nào cũng thấy vợ thì cũng vui, thấy mình cũng vui. Bây giờ thì tôi phục vụ bà ấy tới bến luôn.
in designing and filming a full 3-hour online course which you can watch in your own time exactly how we manufacture and design epoxy tables. In this class we are literally taking you by the hand and showing you from start to finish every single thing you need to know to build a epoxy table successfully. The course is 3 hours long. I am going to leave a link down in the description of this video where you can go to our website and where you can purchase this online epoxy masterclass. I think there's more than 1,000 people that already purchased the class. Moving to the next part in our project, and that was to mark for the steel base, to fasten threaded inserts from the underside. And this is also a crucial step. Don't use screws or anything to fasten your steel base to the underside of your table. Just use threaded inserts. It's really easy to insert them. You can buy this online. I think we literally only have 1 or 2 shops in South Africa that sells decent threaded inserts. Moving to the next part in our project, and that is by giving our table on top and at the bottom a small 45-degree chamfer. Now we really try to keep this chamfer as small as possible because we do want to keep the thickness of the table. We don't want to go and cut too bigger of chamfers because I feel it takes away from the thickness of the table. And another tip I want to share with you guys, in when you're going to router your edges, sand your table up to 180 grit, then you come and give your table a chamfered edge, and then you continue sanding your table, because you will see the router will obviously make marks on the epoxy section of your table, and the bearing of the router will make a small little groove on the side of your table. A groove, not deep, it literally just makes a line that you have to come and sand afterwards. This is quite critical. We found that when we sand it into high grits, bubbles from coming out. And another tip I want to share with you guys is that when you're casting your epoxy, cast it slowly. And as you can see, my live edges on my slabs are not sealed. Now, the way we previously done it in the past is we would seal our live edges with epoxy. We will wait for it to dry. Then we will come and scuff it and sand it up. So when we're going to cast our epoxy, that the new epoxy we're casting will bond to the edge of our slab. But we stopped using that method because if you think about it logically, we want the epoxy to penetrate into the wood. And thus is why we are using this method I'm currently using. We are using a deep casting epoxy, which means I can literally cast the full depth of this table in one go. But we still prefer to cast our epoxy in layers, which takes us round about 5 to 6 days. It's winter now, so it will take round about 6 days and we have so much positive feedback on people that started small companies. People that were so scared of working with epoxy that are so comfortable with working epoxy now. People that's making small chopping boards. People that's DIYists and hobbyists that were so afraid of working with epoxy, and now they are so comfortable with working with epoxy. Like I mentioned, this will literally show you every single thing in detail, how we manufacture and design all our tables. Check this ad out and you can decide for yourself if you want to purchase it or not.
We've been building epoxy tables for many years now, and we are finally going to share all our methods and techniques with you. My name is Greg and I am going to show you how to build the perfect epoxy table. I'm going to show you all the tools you need, exactly how to use them, and show you some tips and tricks down the line. Everyone thinks you need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has set. That's not true. You need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has become tacky. This masterclass has been designed for all woodworkers, from your beginner all the way up to your experts. Click on this video or in the description down below for more information.
So the price percent you don't want to mistake at this part. Another tip I want to share with you guys is in mixing your colors. The specific client asked for a transparent blue color, and it's quite critical in each batch of epoxy you're mixing that you add the exact same amount of drops in to have consistent color scheme. Now I'm just busy testing out our new tool in our shop, and that is a vacuum chamber. And I honestly do have to say that this changed the way we build tables. This method is literally removing all the air bubbles from your epoxy. It was quite expensive, but definitely an investment for our company. Now, busy casting the epoxy, you will see as we cast more layers after one another, you will see the colors will become darker on the blue. And another tip I want to share with you guys, in when you're going to pour your epoxy, pour it on a ridge, on an edge of your table. This will prevent it's difficult to remove the marks the underside of the router makes on the epoxy section. The next step in our project is to continue sanding. Now, this is also a very crucial part in which oil you're going to end up using for your table. If you're going to use Rubio Monocoat, you can only sand your wooden section to 180 grit. Now for us, we are using Odie's oil, which means we can sand to any grit our heart desires, which means that we can sand our wood and our epoxy to 400 grit. And the reason we are sanding to 400 grit sandpaper is because we want a frost smoky finish on our table. If we are going to do a high gloss finish, we are obviously seal our live edges. So you will always have small micro bubbles on the edge of your slab. This is why we cast in layers, because deep casting epoxy obviously takes longer to cure. And this helps us to remove 98% of all our air bubbles. Now, taking the table to one of our suppliers' shop, which he has a massive CNC machine. Now, we are obviously not in a position to purchase a CNC machine because it's truly really expensive. So for a small cost, we just take it to our supplier. It takes us around about 2 hours to flatten our table both sides. And this is the most critical step in making sure that you have a flat surface between your wood and your epoxy. Now, the way we previously done it, I think we only done it once or twice way at the start when we started manufacturing epoxy tables, is we would have done it manually with a router sled. Now, there's nothing wrong with it, but we found that it's so messy and it takes us just too much time in getting our surface flat. And that's why we don't waste our time anymore. We just pay the small fee, and doing it on a CNC machine is just way faster, and it saves us so much time in completing this project. Having the table back in my shop, we are going to start sanding with our Festool Rotex machine in the Rotex setting. Now, the Rotex setting is like a belt sander setting, but it's not as aggressive as a belt sander. This step is to remove all the CNC lines the CNC machine made. You will see on the table there's so many lines, and the 80 grit sandpaper is going to remove all those lines. This step is quite critical for the next step that's going to follow in our build. If you are not using Odys, just give it a try. Now, we are not sponsored by them, but we just love using the oil overall. And just see how this epoxy and the live edge on the inside just pops when we're going to apply this oil. It's absolutely, absolutely beautiful. Now, before I'm going to leave you guys with the final product, I have to ask you guys, if you enjoyed this video and you enjoyed the content and you did learn something new from us, give this video a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you leave a comment down below. What do you think of this table and what would you have done differently? By subscribing to our channel, it's honestly just helping us to grow and helping us to produce more content for you and for everyone out there that wants to build DIY projects and help you guys in building them successfully. I hope you guys enjoy the final product, And make sure you check out our online epoxy masterclass, and you guys can also go and follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and sorry, we don't have TikTok. We had TikTok, but not anymore. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you next week with another super cool project. Thanks guys. Cheers. So once we completed sanding our complete surface of our table, you will see there's obviously still some lines only on the epoxy sections. On the wood sections, it's totally flat. There's no CNC marks. You have to come with your airbrush and remove all the last dust particles in all the small little cracks and holes. Then we go epoxy takes longer to cure. And this is a massive tip I want to share with you guys in casting the next layer. As you can see, the layer I'm busy tapping now is tacky. It's like a toffee, but it's still not a liquid form. And this is absolutely the best method we found in casting the next layer of epoxy. Instead of waiting for that layer to dry and sand it and then cast your next layer, we will wait for the perfect timing once the layer you just casted becomes tacky, that you cast your next layer. That bond between the two layers are absolutely the best bond you will ever get. So there's something I want to share with you guys in something we've been working extremely hard on. And that is by compiling a complete epoxy online masterclass. We get so much queries internationally of all the methods we're using. People keeps on asking us sanding methods, polishing methods, everything regarding how to build a epoxy table successfully. So we took the liberty in different climate situations where the table is going to be. We haven't done this step previously, but we found this seals the wood, and it's definitely going to prevent the wood from moving if there's a very thin layer that's going to penetrate into the wood. And you will see once you're going to apply your layer of epoxy over the complete surface of your table, you will continuously have to come back and close the small little cracks and holes, because the epoxy is going to penetrate into that crack, and then you're going to have to come and fill that crack afterwards. And so for the holes as well. This is quite crucial in your build to get the perfect surface and to get the perfect finish at the end of your project. So once we are done with this step, we will leave this top coat of epoxy for around about 2 days to give it time to penetrate into the wood and give it time to get extremely hard. Now, it's also important to know that the epoxy we're using that we casted the table and the epoxy we are using now to apply the top coat is 2 different types of epoxy. If you are going to use deep casting epoxy for this top coat I'm applying now, you are most probably gonna wait 3 to 5 days for that epoxy to cure, because deep casting epoxy is not designed to be casted in a thin layer. It's designed to be casted in a thick layer. That is quite crucial. And as you can see, I am busy closing all the small little cracks and holes, because the epoxy keeps on going into the cracks, and this is quite an irritating step, and you have to start this in the morning because you're continuously going to come back and fill that crack. Otherwise, if you're going to do it just before you go home, you'll come back the next day and you will find that that crack is still open. And it's also quite crucial to come with your gas torch and torch all the small little bubbles that will occur once you're going to apply this thin layer of epoxy over your wooden section of your table. Moving to the next step in our project, and that is by cutting our table down to its final size. Another tip I want to share with you guys in when you're designing and building your table, always build it slightly bigger lengthwise and widthwise, because you don't want to build a 2.4 meter table and then you're gonna have to cut it down slightly. This is dumb if you ask me. So once you cut your first line on the longer edge of your table, we will take that measurements and copy it to the other side to make sure that the 2 longer sides of our table is exactly parallel. And then after, we will come and square the smaller edges of our table off with a square. This is quite crucial. Don't start with your smaller edges of your table. Always start with the longer edges. We found that previously we done a table and we started cutting the shorter edges of our table and we struggled to get the table square. So start with the longer edges of your table. And for this step, I am using my HK85 track saw. And as you can see, I must probably got like 10 to 15 more left on the thickness of my table, which meaning my table was things in this project that you can take and learn from us. We are also continuously always seeking new methods, new techniques, speaking to new suppliers internationally, and see how we can better our methods and techniques of building epoxy tables. I honestly think that there's always room for improvement, and I currently think that the methods we are currently using is the absolute best, but I can guarantee you that most probably by the near future there will always be smaller things in our shop we will change, just to make life easier for us and to make the design and manufacturing of building epoxy tables easier for us. And you guys do want to stick around till around about the middle part of this video, because there's a really important announcement we want to share with all the hobbyists the DIYers, and for all the people that wants to start a company but don't know where to start. And you guys do want to stick around till the end to see how this masterpiece came out. Now, starting this week's project off, we are going to build something unique, something special, something the client asked us that they don't want a traditional epoxy river table. They wanted something different, something funky. And that's where the design part of this project was really tricky. I think we took, normally when we design epoxy tables, we will take around about half an hour to an hour to design the layout. We will send it to the client and they want to mix a separate small batch of epoxy, because 90% of all the slabs we receive from the kiln dry is really dry. I would say it's around about 10% in moisture, and this means that there's a lot of cracks that occurs in the wood, and we obviously have to close this. Now this is where the next step is quite crucial, because you do want to close all that small little cracks and holes and imperfection on the top and the bottom of your table. It's quite critical to finish the bottom of your table exactly the same as your top of the table, because the client obviously pays premium prices for the table, and you don't want to give him something that you haven't done in a perfect way. Last step before we're going to oil, we are going to add our signature to our tables. Now we are super proud of our brand, and as you can see, it's obviously not DIY with Greg. We actually do have a custom fabricator company called Craft House, which we focus on bespoke, luxury, handcrafted South African furniture. Now, this is the part I want to show you guys. We are using Odie's oil, and we will start with the Odie's oil Super Duper. And we did add a little bit of the espresso powder, which will make the oil slightly browner. Now, the reason why we do this is we want to remove most of the yellows in the wood. And we will typically start with the Odie's oil Super Duper. We will use a very old sander on a low RPM, because the vibration of the sander massages the oil into the wood. We love this step. Once we applied the first coat of oil, we will leave our table for around about 1 to 1.5 hours. Then we will come and buff the oil off. Coming back the next day, round about 24 to 30 hours later, then we will come and apply the original Odie's oil. We will leave it for 1 hour, and then we will come and buff it off. Then we will leave the table for another day or two and give that oil enough chance to penetrate into the wood. And we will repeat the same process for the underside, obviously. Now, I know it takes us a total of around about 4 to 5 days to oil our tables. I know this is long, but we love using Odie's. It's absolutely our favorite oil we like using when we building epoxy tables. And if I can advise you guys, so this step is number 1, to close all the small little cracks and holes. And I'm putting a very thick coat of epoxy on, because I want the coat of epoxy to penetrate into the wood. This is also going to help to seal the wood long term if the wood decides to shrink or expand. We're happy with it. With this specific project, we took almost, I would say, estimate around about 3 hours just to design this table. And I honestly do have to say that this table came out absolutely stunning. The prices for the course will go up by next month, so you guys must probably have another week left. Then the course will double in price, so make sure you go and check it out before the prices go up. Continuing with the video, like I mentioned before, we are using a deep casting epoxy, which technically we can cast the whole table in one go, but what we found is that casting in layers, we are still using a deep casting epoxy, but casting the table over the course of, say, 5 to 6 days, casting a total amount of, depending on the thickness of the slab, we will cast around about five layers we will cast, and we found that this reduces the amount of bubbles we have. Remember, we don't going to sand all the way up to 1500 grit. And the last step before we go into oil is just to give our table a good clean. Now I am using my polish machine. Now trust me, this is not to polish the table. This is just to remove that last white dust particles the sander makes, and this is quite crucial, and we found that this method is the best method in removing the last dust particles. Apologies, the last is a total of 60 millimeters thick. In the center of this video, where I'm going to do some more explanation on a epoxy masterclass we are presenting for people that wants to start building epoxy tables. Now I'm just busy mixing my part A resin and my part B hardener together, and it's quite critical to get your ratios absolutely 100. Specific wood species we are using for this project, it's called Matumi, because we always get queries internationally for all the tables we build. People always want to know what wood species we are using. So it's called Matumi, and unfortunately for all the international viewers, this is only locally sourced from South Africa. It comes more from Tseninworld up all the way into Botswana, going up all the way into Africa. It's one of the most popular wood species to build epoxy tables in our country. And I honestly do have to say the design came out magnificent. Also, another tip I want to share with you guys, what I'm busy doing now, is something we normally don't record on video. And before you're going to place your slabs into the mold, always make sure to airbrush them to remove all the dust particles from your slab. Also remember to wipe your wood off, because there will always be smaller dust particles that you need to remove before you're going to cast your epoxy. Now we're just busy placing all our pieces of wood into our mold we just built, and I know I'm most probably going to get some critics for this step, but we found in removing all the dust particles before we're going to cast our epoxy, we just use a leaf blower because there's enormous amount of air that comes out that goes into all the small little cracks and holes that will remove the last dust particles. Now I'm just busy calculating the amount of epoxy we're going to use, and this was a really tricky calculation because there was a lot of bends, twists and turns, height differences, but at the end it's not that difficult of a calculation to make. It's really simple if you don't complicate things too much. It's a simple calculation of length times width times height, and I will go more into detail on this, tips and tricks down the line. Hopefully by the end of this video you will also be able to build a epoxy table successfully. It's obviously not that simple, but we are going to give you our most valuable insight of designing and manufacturing epoxy tables successfully. And you guys do want to stick around until the middle part of this video, because we got a really important announcement we want to share with all the hobbyists, the DIYers, and for all the people that wants to start the epoxy company but don't know where to start. Maybe you are a master already, but there might be some